Usually when we talk about a childhood dream, it's something grand, like being an astronaut or a movie star, maybe discovering a new planet.
Right.
But as we get older, and especially as we navigate this modern world, there's this other much quieter dream that kind of creeps in. The desire to just, go unnoticed.
Yeah.
To take a walk completely off the grid without a single record that you were ever there. No location ping, no credit card swipe, no facial recognition camera at the intersection.
It's a deeply human desire. I mean, we hold on to this idea that our baseline state of existence is private.
Yeah, exactly.
That we're moving through the world invisibly, and we only become visible when we actively choose to step into the spotlight.
But then you look at the actual architecture of the digital landscape we live in today, and suddenly you realize that dream is fundamentally impossible.
It really is.
We're looking at a reality where the very concept of going unnoticed has been structurally eliminated. Every step you take, every swipe on your screen, every half-second hesitation before scrolling past a video, it's all being captured.
It is the absolute definition of a tracked existence. And it's not just happening by accident, It sees the foundational logic of our era.
Right.
To really understand the mechanics of how this happened, and more importantly, what it's doing to our society, we have to examine the underlying philosophy. And that brings us to Philippe Huneman's book, Profiling, How Predictive Algorithms Shape Identity and the Social Fabric.
And Huneman's work is dense.
Oh, very.
It's philosophical, and it is arguably one of the most important maps we have for navigating this digital reality. So we are going to dive deep into this text today. Our mission for this deep dive is to trace the historical shift that brought us to this point.
Right, because we didn't just get here overnight.
Exactly. We need to break down the actual causal logic of how these predictive algorithms operate and critically evaluate what this means for human autonomy. Like, are we still making our own choices, or is the environment making them for us?
To answer that, Huneman argues we have to start by looking backward.
Okay.
We can't grasp the magnitude of algorithms without understanding the societal structures they replaced. So he proposes that modern society has moved through 3 distinct phases of power and control.
Right, okay.
The first is what the French philosopher Michel Foucault famously called the disciplinary society.
So we're talking about the 19th and early 20th centuries here, the era of the Industrial Revolution. Foucault focused on institutions, right?
Precisely.
Like schools, factories, prisons, military barracks?
Yeah. The disciplinary society was all about enclosure and standardization. You take a human body, you place it inside a physical building with walls, and you mold its behavior.
Right. You sit at this specific desk.
You pull this lever on the assembly line for exactly 8 hours.
You wake up when the bell rings.
You eat when the whistle blows. It was a rigid, physical molding of the individual to fit the needs of industrial capitalism.
Okay, let's unpack this. It is basically putting people into boxes to make them predictable and productive.
Yes.
But that model doesn't really fit the world we grew up in. We don't spend our entire lives confined to a single factory floor anymore.
We don't. And that shift was captured toward the end of the 20th century by another philosopher, Gilles Deleuze.
Deleuze, yeah.
He noticed that the walls of those institutions were breaking down, and we were moving into what he called the control society.
How does control differ from discipline in this context? Because they sound pretty similar.
They do, but discipline happens inside a closed space.
Okay.
Control happens out in the open through continuous monitoring of your trajectory.
Yeah.
Deleuze used brilliant, prescient examples for his time, like the credit card and the electronic collar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In a control society, you aren't confined to a single building. You can move freely, but your movement is regulated by a continuous stream of checkpoints.
Like a toll booth.
Exactly. A toll booth, a password screen, a card swipe. You are allowed or denied access based on your credentials at that exact moment in time.
It's like moving from a world where a guard watches you sit in a cell, which is discipline, to a world where someone watches you walk down the street and checks your ID at every corner.
Yes.
You feel free, but your current state is constantly being verified.
That's a perfect way to visualize it. But Huneman argues that we have now moved beyond even Deleuze's control society. We've entered the profiling society.
And the distinction here is massive, right?
It changes everything. The control society tracks where you are in the present moment to grant or deny access. The profiling society uses predictive algorithms and big data to predict your choices and beliefs in order to shape your future.
It's not just checking my ID at the corner anymore.
No.
It's analyzing my gait on the sidewalk, cross-referencing it with my grocery list, and building a new store at the end of the block before I even get there. It anticipates me.
Yes, and to do that, to anticipate you with mathematical certainty, the profiling society requires a new kind of raw material.
Traces.
It needs traces, yes.
Let's define traces, because Huneman leans really heavily on this concept. Traces are essentially the digital footprints we leave behind, the data exhaust of our daily lives.
Right.
And what's wild is that we leave them both intentionally and completely unintentionally.
The intentional traces are obvious,
Yeah.
The photos you upload, the statuses you post, the reviews you write on Yelp.
Sure, I know I'm doing that.
But the unintentional traces are where the true volume lies. It's the metadata. How long your cursor hovered over a specific image.
Oh, man.
The geographical location tagged to a photo you thought was just a picture of your cat. The precise time of day you tend to open a certain app on your phone.
Huneman brings up this incredibly unsettling example from a French underground magazine called Le Tigre to illustrate how powerful these traces are.
Oh, the Markel case.
Yes. Yeah, this was back in 2009, long before most of us were thinking critically about privacy. The magazine wanted to prove a point about digital footprints, so they picked a completely random guy on the internet, someone they called Mark L.
Just a normal person.
Completely normal. They didn't hack him. They just looked at his public Flickr account.
They analyzed his 17,000 public photos.
Right. And from those publicly available photos, they reconstructed his entire life.
It's terrifying.
They figured out where his friends lived, the layouts of his apartments, his travel history, his daily routines, even his phone number. They essentially wrote an unauthorized biography of this random citizen.
And he willingly uploaded those photos.
Exactly. But he had absolutely no idea that the aggregate of those traces formed a complete searchable map of his existence.
The philosophical significance of the Markel story is profound. It demonstrates that privacy is no longer a physical boundary we can just lock a door against.
Yeah.
Privacy has transformed from something we actively protect into a resource that is constantly being extracted from us.
Right, it's a resource now.
We are no longer simply the subjects of our own private lives. We are generators of traces. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this extraction relies on a systemic process that Huneman calls datafication.
Datafication, taking the messy, chaotic real world and turning it into spreadsheets.
Essentially, yes. It is the process of turning every aspect of life, biological, social, environmental, into data points that can be processed and calculated by an algorithm.
And it is not just human behavior. It is literally the physical world. Huneman uses the example of the GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility.
Right, the animal database.
Yeah, it rests this massive global database that standardizes animal occurrences.
This is the crucial example. Imagine a gray wolf hunting in a dense North American forest and a microscopic marine animal floating off the coast of Sweden.
Okay, totally different.
In physical reality, their existences share almost nothing. They live in different mediums, operate on different biological scales, they have entirely different life cycles.
But once they are entered into the GBIF database, they undergo datafication.
Yes.
They are stripped of their physical reality and converted into columns on a screen. Date observed, latitude, longitude, species ID photograph attached.
Exactly.
Suddenly, the wolf and the plankton are treated as completely equivalent data points.
They have been made commensurable. This imposes what Huneman calls interoperability on the world.
Interoperability.
Yeah, datafication reduces the rich, hyper-complex reality of life into flat, standardized metrics. A wolf, a marine animal, a teenager's TikTok viewing habit, a stock market fluctuation, a smart thermostat's temperature reading under datafication, they all become the exact same fundamental substance.
They all just become math.
Math that can be cross-referenced.
Yeah.
And interoperability is the prerequisite for the profiling society to exist. Because if everything is just standardized data, algorithms can compare and correlate things that naturally have absolutely no physical or logical connection.
That sets up the epistemological shift Huneman talks about, epistemology, the philosophy of how we know what we know. We've established what data is being collected through traces and datafication. Now we need to look at how algorithms actually generate knowledge from that data. And Huneman says we have completely abandoned causality.
This is perhaps the most monumental shift in human knowledge since the Enlightenment.
That's a big claim.
It is. But traditionally, science and human understanding were built on seeking causality. We wanted to know why things happened.
Right, like cause and effect.
Exactly. Isaac Newton didn't just want to know that the apple fell. He wanted to understand the underlying mechanism of gravity that caused it to fall. Causality is about understanding the mechanics of reality.
But big data prediction doesn't care about the mechanics at all. It doesn't care why something happens. It only cares that the statistical pattern exists. It is entirely based on correlation.
Exactly. An algorithm looks at millions of variables in what data scientists call hyperdimensional space.
Hold on, let's ground that term. Hyperdimensional space sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel. What does that actually mean for my data?
It's simpler than it sounds. Think of a spreadsheet.
Okay.
If you track someone's age and their income, that's 2 dimensions, 2 columns. You can graph that on a standard XY axis on a piece of paper.
Right.
If you add their height, that's 3 dimensions. You can visualize that as a 3D cube.
Sure.
But algorithms don't track 3 things. They track thousands. Your typing speed, your location, the brightness of your screen, the genres of music you listen to, the time you spend reading an email.
Wow.
Each of those thousands of variables is a new dimension, a new column on the spreadsheet. Humans cannot visualize a 5,000-dimensional graph, but an algorithm can calculate the distances between data points in that space instantly.
So it's looking for clusters of similarities across thousands of random variables.
Yes, and it finds signatures and patterns without needing any logical explanation for them.
Huneman gives some mind-bending examples of this. Take tennis algorithms.
Right.
They can predict the outcome of a professional tennis match with incredible accuracy by analyzing data points like the local weather, the player's recent sleep schedules, the time of day, and historical win rates.
Yep.
But the algorithm predicting the match has absolutely no understanding of tennis theory.
None at all. It doesn't know the physics of topspin. It doesn't know what a forehand is. It doesn't know what a racket is made of.
It just knows that when variables A, B, and C align, player X usually wins. It leans knowledge without understanding. Another classic example he cites is spurious correlation.
The cheese one.
Yeah, you run enough data, and an algorithm might find that mozzarella cheese consumption directly correlates with the suicide rate in Nebraska over a 10-year period.
From a causal perspective, that is meaningless nonsense.
Exactly.
Eating mozzarella does not cause someone to take their own life. But from a purely mathematical, correlative perspective, the pattern is real. The algorithm sees the lines on the graph moving together and flags it as a predictive relationship. It doesn't ask why, it just outputs the probability.
And when you take this logic, generating predictions purely through mathematical correlation without caring about the why, and you apply it to human beings, you get profiles.
Which is the namesake of the book. We use the word profile loosely in everyday conversation, usually mean a user account. But Human gives it a very specific dual definition. First, there is the individual profile.
That is the aggregate of my specific traces. My search history, my location data, my purchases. It sees the digital footprint I personally leave behind.
But the real power lies in the collective profile. A collective profile is a statistical clustering of shared traits across millions of users in that hyperdimensional space we just talked about.
How does that actually work in practice? Like, how does the math jump from the collective back to me?
Let's use Spotify as an example. Through datafication, Spotify analyzes the listening habits of its entire user base. Its algorithms notice a dense cluster of users who share thousands of similar data points. They listen to the same bands, skip the same songs, log on at the same times.
Okay.
Spotify slaps a label on this collective profile. Let's call them symphonic metal fans.
So they have this big bucket of data representing a type of listener.
Now, you log on. Your individual profile shows that you listened to 3 symphonic metal tracks this week. The algorithm immediately maps your individual profile into that collective symphonic metal fan bucket.
Right.
But here's the epistemological leap. The algorithm then assumes you share other, entirely unseen traits with the rest of that collective group.
So if 80% of the people in the symphonic metal bucket also happen to buy a specific brand of energy drink or vote for a specific political party, the algorithm correlates that to me.
Exactly. It predicts your future behavior based on the statistical weight of the collective, completely bypassing your individual psychology. It doesn't know why symphonic metal correlates with that energy drink. It just knows the probability is high enough to act on.
This makes the profile a very eerie hybrid object. It exists before you in the form of this massive collective data set, but it also goes beyond you.
Yes.
It predicts desires and behaviors that you might not even consciously know about yourself yet. It knows you are mathematically likely to buy that energy drink next week, even though you haven't even thought about it today.
And this brings us to the economic engine driving this entire epistemological shift. Why spend billions of dollars building server farms to calculate these correlations?
Right, there has to be money in it.
Oh, there is. Huneman draws heavily here on the work of Shoshana Zuboff and her concept of behavioral surplus.
Behavioral surplus, the data left over.
When you use a digital service, say Google Search, the platform only needs a tiny fraction of your data to actually deliver a good search result. It needs the keyword you typed,
Okay.
but it extracts vastly more. Your physical location, the make and model of your phone, your typing speed, the tabs you have open in the background. That extra data is the behavioral surplus. It is not used to improve the service for you. It is used to train predictive models.
I have to push back here, or at least play devil's advocate, because when we talk about using data to predict what I might buy, isn't this just advanced marketing?
That's a common argument, yeah.
How is a collective profile philosophically different from a billboard on the side of a highway? A billboard for a burger joint assumes that if I'm driving on this highway at noon, I might be hungry. It serves predicting my behavior to sell me something. Why is human treating algorithms like a completely new paradigm?
What's fascinating here is that the difference lies in the mechanism of power and the scale of certainty. A billboard operates on a generalized psychological assumption, a loose causal guess. It says people drive cars, driving makes people tired and hungry, therefore a burger ad might work. It is hoping to influence a broad demographic.
It's casting a wide, dumb net.
Exactly. Profiling, however, operates on individualized, hyperdimensional mathematical certainty. It isn't guessing based on human psychology. It is correlating thousands of unseen variables to predict your specific granular behavior at a specific microsecond.
Wow.
And more importantly, Google isn't just showing you an ad. It is selling the certainty of your future behavior to third-party advertisers.
It's selling the prediction itself.
It represents an entirely new form of capitalist extraction. In the industrial era, capitalism exploited physical labor. The workers sold their time and sweat to build a product.
Right.
In the profiling society, our very digital existence, our everyday lives, our social interactions, our mundane traces, are mined as raw material. We don't even have to be working to be generating surplus value for a platform.
Okay, that clarifies the stakes. So the platforms have our data, they've abandoned causality for these massive mathematical correlations, and they've built these hyper-accurate collective profiles. They know what we are likely to do.
Yes.
But knowing what I might do doesn't necessarily make them money. They have to ensure I actually do it. What is the next step in this causal chain?
The next step is taking that predictive power and using it to design the environment around you. Once a system can predict your behavior, it can shape the interface to guarantee that behavior.
Shaping the environment.
Yeah, Huneman explores this through the concept of digital paternalism and the behavioral economics tool known as nudging.
Nudging, the deliberate design of the architecture of choice. It's steering people toward a desired outcome without explicitly forcing them.
It relies on the psychological reality that humans are not perfectly rational calculating machines. We have cognitive biases, we get fatigued, we default to the path of least resistance. Nudging takes advantage of that.
The examples of this are everywhere once you start looking. It is the brightly colored, massive accept all cookies button versus the tiny, grayed out, hard to read, manage preferences text hidden at the very bottom of the screen.
Yes, dark patterns.
Or the default location settings on a new smartphone.
Yeah.
You aren't forced to share your location, but the architecture of the phone requires you to dig through 5 different nested menus to turn it off.
You aren't being coerced with a weapon, but the floor of the digital environment is being tilted so that you naturally roll in a specific direction.
That's a great metaphor.
Now, the original philosophical justification for nudging, proposed by behavioral economists, was paternalistic but supposedly benevolent. The idea was that since humans are irrational and prone to short-term thinking, like eating junk food instead of saving for retirement, institutions should nudge us toward our true long-term preferences.
Like a cafeteria putting the apples at eye level and hiding the candy bars down low. It nudges you to eat healthier.
Exactly. But Huneman points out the glaring flaw when this is applied to the digital profiling society. On the internet, the choice architecture is almost never designed for your health, your well-being, or your long-term goals.
Right.
It is designed for the platform's profit. You are being nudged to generate more behavioral surplus.
And as this choice architecture guides our behavior, it starts grouping us together into what Huneman calls algorithmic communities. Now, this is a concept that fascinated me because we usually think of a community as people who share a geography or a religion or a political reality.
Algorithmic communities are entirely different. They are micro-niches formed purely by the mathematical clustering we discussed earlier.
You used the word orthogonally when we were discussing this earlier. What does it mean that these communities partition society orthogonally?
Imagine society as a standard grid based on traditional demographics:
Yeah.
age, income, zip code. If you slice that grid horizontally, you group all the middle-class people together.
Okay.
If you slice it vertically, you group all the people in a specific city together. Cutting orthogonally means slicing through the grid at bizarre diagonal angles. It ignores traditional human boundaries completely.
So it unites people who have absolutely nothing in common in the physical world.
Right. Think of the followers of a highly specific beauty influencer, or people who use a specific smart scale app and benchmark their daily weight fluctuations against total strangers on a leaderboard.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
You are united with these people purely based on statistical biases and the optimization goals of the algorithm. You share a collective profile. You are both in this symphonic metal fan bucket, but you may share absolutely no other social, political, or economic reality.
It's a community devoid of actual human solidarity. It's just a cluster of data points being nudged in the same direction.
Exactly.
And within these strange, curated environments, Huneman identifies a massive shift toward curation and deference.
Deference is a critical concept here. Because the digital landscape is infinitely large, we cannot possibly navigate it alone. We are forced to rely on algorithms to curate the world for us. And in doing so, we outsource our judgment. We defer to the machine.
We defer to Google's PageRank algorithm to tell us which information is the most relevant and authoritative. We defer to an AI summarizer to read a complex article and tell us what it means.
We are replacing human editors, peer review systems, and traditional domain experts with opaque algorithms. And the danger is that these algorithms are optimized for engagement and behavioral surplus, not for objective truth or civic well-being.
Which raises the ultimate philosophical question of the book. What does this do to our free will? If I am constantly being nudged by an architecture of choice that I didn't design based on a collective profile I can't see, am I actually making choices?
According to Huneman, our autonomy is being quietly and systematically hijacked. We navigate these digital spaces feeling a profound sense of agency. We click the button, we choose a song, we buy the product. The subjective feeling of free will remains completely intact.
But it's an illusion.
Yeah. Our environment has been meticulously curated to ensure that the choice we naturally, intuitively gravitate toward just happens to be the most profitable choice for the platform.
It's an invisible enclosure. Foucault's prison has stone walls you could touch. The profiling society's walls are made of personalized convenience.
That's very well put.
And it isn't just about selling us shoes or energy drinks. Huneman looks at how these exact same profile-driven nudges are deployed in the political sphere.
Yes, the book examines how political campaigns utilize the architecture of choice. Huneman points to the use of data firms like Cambridge Analytica during major events like the Brexit campaign and the 2016 U.S. elections.
Right.
The text analyzes these events strictly to illustrate a structural mechanism. By identifying specific collective profiles, say a cluster of statistically undecided voters who share high anxiety markers in their data, algorithms can subtly curate their social media feeds.
They change what they see.
Exactly. They can expose that specific cluster to tailored information or even simulated outrage to nudge their political behavior at the ballot box.
The underlying math doesn't care if it's selling a commercial product or a political ideology. The mechanism of shaping behavior is identical. And the ultimate goal of all this behavioral shaping boils down to the extraction of our most finite, unrenewable resource, our time.
This is where Huneman introduces a brilliant linguistic concept, addictive logics. It's a portmanteau of addiction and attention.
It is the perfect word to describe the design of modern platforms. They are engineered from the ground up to continuously capture, hold, and monetize user attention through stochastic rewards.
Stochastic meaning randomized and unpredictable.
Like a casino slot machine. Think about the swipe feature on a dating app like Tinder or the endless scroll of a TikTok feed. You don't know when the match is coming or when the next video will give you that hit of dopamine.
Yeah, the unpredictability is the point.
It keeps you pulling the lever. I think we've all had that moment where we intend to look at our phone for 2 minutes and suddenly an hour has vanished. That isn't a failure of our personal willpower. That is the addictive logic functioning exactly as it was engineered to.
It transforms human attention into a quantifiable, extractable commodity. And this constant demand for attention leads to a societal state that Huneman calls total mobilization.
Mobilization usually implies a military draft, getting everyone ready for war. How does he apply it here?
In the profiling society, it means the algorithmic orchestration of time, where every idle moment, every unused physical asset is converted into a profitable resource. The boundary between work and leisure is completely erased.
I feel this constantly. You go on vacation and you look at your empty apartment and you realize you could be renting it out on Airbnb.
Yes.
You have an empty seat in your car and you realize you could be driving for Uber. Suddenly, choosing to just relax feels like you are actively losing money.
Because the platforms have mapped the world so efficiently, any unmonetized time or space feels like a failure of optimization. Capitalism, facilitated by algorithms, is now extracting value from every waking moment.
Even sleeping, if you have a sleep tracker on.
Precisely.
Okay, so we have the traces, the datafication, the correlation, the profiles, the nudges, and the extraction of our time. But this is the point in the book where Huneman drops the real hammer. We reach the climax of his argument. He posits that these algorithms are no longer just predicting reality, they're actually manufacturing it.
This is a complex but vital concept. It requires understanding feedback loops. A feedback loop occurs when an algorithm predicts a behavior, nudges the user to perform that behavior, and then uses the resulting data to validate its initial prediction.
I need an example to grasp this. Let's go back to Spotify.
Okay. Spotify's algorithm predicts you will like a specific, obscure indie folk song based on your collective profile. It then places that song at the very top of your highly customized Discover Weekly playlist.
It nudges me.
Yes. You log in, you see the playlist, and you listen to the song, primarily because it was placed directly in front of you on a platform you trust. The algorithm registers your listen as a data point. It then logs a successful prediction. It predicted you would like it, and you listened to it.
But wait, did it actually predict my organic taste, or did it dictate my taste by controlling the menu of options?
Exactly. The philosophical significance here is staggering. In a traditional scientific model, a prediction is tested against an independent reality. A meteorologist predicts rain, and then we wait to see if the sky actually produces rain.
Right.
But in the profiling society, predictions can no longer be tested for accuracy because the prediction itself brings about the reality it predicted. The algorithm manufactures the outcome it claims to have foreseen.
And this manufacturing of reality happens in a digital environment characterized by what Huneman calls miscibility.
Miscibility is a term from chemistry. It describes liquids mixing together so completely that they form a single homogeneous solution. You can't separate the water from the alcohol once they are mixed.
Huneman applies this to the total blending of digital and physical reality, where local context is just erased.
A perfect example is navigation apps like Waze. Let us say there is heavy traffic on a major commuter highway. The algorithm is trying to optimize the flow of vectors on its map. It sees a tiny one-lane dirt road running through a quiet rural village that runs parallel to the highway.
And it routes 1,000 aggressive commuters hauling through this quiet neighborhood just to save them 3 minutes.
Because to the algorithm, there is absolutely no difference between a dirt road next to a school and a 4-lane concrete highway. It lacks all physical, social, or local context. They're completely missable. They are just equivalent mathematical vectors on a digital map. The digital model imposes its logic onto the physical world, disrupting the actual village.
And because of these feedback loops dictating behavior and this miscibility erasing context, Huneman argues we have entered a new epistemological regime. He calls it veroneutrality.
Veroneutrality, the state of being completely indifferent to the truth.
Now, I struggled with this term initially. Is veroneutrality just a fancy academic word for lying or generating fake news?
No, and the distinction is crucial. To lie, you have to possess a concept of the truth and actively choose to subvert it. Veroneutrality is a system that simply does not compute truth as a variable. Efficiency, engagement, and effect replace truth as the ultimate metrics of success.
The most obvious modern example has to be large language models, right? Things like ChatGPT.
Absolutely. When an LLM generates a paragraph of text, it does not know if what it is saying is factually true or false. It has no tether to physical reality. It is simply calculating the mathematical probability of what the next word should be based on billions of words in its training data.
Truth is no longer the standard. Generating a plausible, engaging output that keeps the user interacting is the standard.
And this indifference to truth allows for the massive proliferation of simulacra.
Simulacra. Copies without an original, fake representations that produce real effects. I absolutely love the story Huneman includes to illustrate this. There was this British prankster, Ubba Butler.
Oh, this is a great story.
He decided to create a completely fake restaurant on TripAdvisor He called it the shed at Dulwich. It didn't exist. It was literally just the shed in his backyard.
But he understood the algorithm.
Right. He took close-up photos of shaving cream and bleach blocks, pretending it was gourmet food. He had his friends write hundreds of fake, glowing reviews from different IP addresses. He manipulated the algorithmic architecture of TripAdvisor so effectively that this non-existent restaurant became the #1 rated restaurant in all of London.
And what happened in the physical world?
Real people started calling his personal phone, begging for reservations. PR agencies were trying to represent him. The simulacrum, the completely fake data, produced a very real-world frenzy. The physical world bent to the will of the digital illusion.
This raises an important question. In a world governed by feedback loops, vera neutrality, and simulacra, what happens to human accountability?
Yeah, if an AI hallucinates a legal precedent and a lawyer uses it, or if a self-driving car algorithm misinterprets a shadow and causes a fatal crash, who is responsible?
Accountability simply dissolves. It evaporates into the complex, opaque network of the profiling society. You can't sue a mathematical correlation. There is no single human entity to hold responsible when the architecture itself is doing the deciding. It's a diffusion of responsibility on a societal scale.
Okay, we have meticulously mapped out this causal chain. We've gone from Foucault's prisons to Deleuze's checkpoints to traces, datafication, massive correlative profiles, nudges shaping our choices, the total extraction of our time, and finally, the creation of a closed-loop reality that is completely indifferent to the truth.
It's quite a journey.
It is a brilliant, terrifying analysis. But now we need to shift gears. We have to critically evaluate it, because no philosophical framework is perfect. What are Huneman's blind spots? What is he missing?
While his analysis of the psychological and epistemological effects of algorithms is masterful, his framework has a significant blind spot regarding political economy and the global south.
Yeah, reading the book, the algorithms almost feel ethereal, like they are just math floating in the cloud, magically nudging us in Western cities.
But the cloud is heavily grounded in physical reality. To fully grasp this, we have to put Huneman in conversation with other scholars. Kate Crawford's book, An Atlas of AI, is the perfect counterweight here. Crawford details the massive material and human exploitation required to sustain the profiling society.
It requires colossal lithium mines to build the batteries. It requires energy-guzzling server farms that drain local water supplies for cooling.
And, crucially, it requires armies of underpaid, traumatized click farm workers, primarily located in the global south. These are real humans manually labeling violent or explicit data to train the AI so that Western users don't have to see it. Huneman acknowledges the materiality briefly, but the global south largely exists in his framework as a site of hidden extraction rather than a focus of the societal shift.
His lens is very Western-centric. He relies on Foucault and Deleuze, who are writing about Western European institutions. He mentions China's social credit system as an extreme example of profiling, but he doesn't really explore how datafication intersects with entirely different cultural norms or political systems outside the US and Europe.
Right. To build a complete picture of resistance, we also have to look at Francois as the black box society, which emphasizes the sheer legal and corporate opacity of these algorithms, how we literally aren't allowed to see the rules governing our lives.
Yeah, they're trade secrets.
Exactly. And Bernard Harcourt has Exposed, which digs deeper into why we voluntarily, eagerly strip ourselves of privacy for the sake of social media likes.
So, synthesizing Huneman diagnosis with these broader critiques, we arrive at the final, most important question. How do we survive this? If the architecture of choice is rigged, how do we maintain our autonomy? Huneman frames this as a quest for authenticity.
Authenticity in this context is the ethical quest to experience reality genuinely, in defiance of algorithmic optimization. He illustrates this using a famous philosophical thought experiment known as the experience machine.
The premise is simple. If you were offered the chance to plug your brain into a machine, a perfect VR simulation that would give you a perfectly optimized, flawlessly happy life where you achieved all your dreams, would you plug in?
Most people instinctively say no.
Why? Because we inherently value reality even when it sucks. We value the friction, the unoptimized struggles, the grief, and the physical constraints of actual life. We want to be authentic even if it hurts. We don't want a missable, vera-neutral simulation. So practically speaking, what are the actionable methods for resisting datafication?
Huneman suggests resistance must happen on two fronts, structural and personal. Structurally, we have to stop treating algorithms as private, proprietary property and start treating them as a public commons.
Like a utility, like water or the power grid.
Exactly. Because predictive algorithms now condition our social environment as completely as the air we breathe. They require democratic regulation. We must demand radical transparency into how the black boxes operate, and perhaps even establish forms of public ownership over the systems that dictate civic life.
That is the macro level. But on a personal level, Huneman suggests a strategy that sounds almost overly simple at first: embracing the outside, turning away from the screen and actively engaging with the non-human world. He specifically highlights reading books about non-human life, like books about trees or crocodiles or bears.
It sounds quaint, but the philosophical implications are profound.
Yeah.
To resist datafication, you must engage with a consciousness that cannot be datafied. A bear living in a forest does not have an individual profile. A river does not generate behavioral surplus.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The irony is just staggering. We have spent decades building the most hyper-advanced, mathematically complex AI systems in human history, capable of predicting our desires before we even feel them. And yet, one of the most profound acts of political resistance you can engage in today is simply sitting under a tree and reading a book about a bear. By choosing to step out of the hyperdimensional space, by choosing not to generate optimal data, you break the feedback loop. You accept the friction of unmediated life.
It is a reclamation of your time and your traces. To bring our journey full circle, we have traced the evolution of power from the rigid walls of disciplinary prisons to the electronic checkpoints of the control society, to the invisible predictive nudges of the profiling society. We've seen how correlation has replaced causality and how truth has been replaced by engagement.
The main takeaway for me is a shift in perspective. Every single time you open your phone, every time you unlock it with your face, scroll through a feed, or accept a routed shortcut on a map, you have to remember your dual role. Yes, you are the consumer enjoying a convenient service, but simultaneously, your life, your traces, your very behavior is the raw material. You are the fuel keeping this engine running.
And as a final thought to mull over, something inspired by Huneman's analysis, but looking at the broader trajectory of where this takes us. In evolutionary biology, there is a concept known as the Red Queen hypothesis.
From Alice in Wonderland. It takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place.
Precisely. In nature, a species must constantly adapt and evolve, not to gain ultimate dominance, but simply to survive against ever-evolving predators in changing environments. I would argue that in the profiling society, we are trapped in an algorithmic Red Queen's race.
How does it apply to us and the algorithms?
Think about our attempts to fix the system. We realize an algorithm is racially biased or politically polarizing, so we deploy engineers to debias it. We tweak the math. But the human society generating the data is also constantly shifting. The new data collected simply reflects the new, evolving biases and anxieties of humanity, which feeds back into the system, requiring yet another round of algorithmic debiasing.
It's an endless loop of patching the code.
The provocative question is this: are we destined to just run endlessly on this digital treadmill, constantly trying to fix a mathematical reflection of our society instead of stopping the machine to actually address the systemic physical flaws in our real human world?
It really makes you wonder. The next time you go for a walk and you think about that quiet dream of just going unnoticed, maybe the only way to truly disappear isn't to figure out how to hide from the cameras. Maybe the only way out is to recognize the treadmill for what it is and simply choose to stop running.